Hello, this is NeMina TD and I'm Mina. Welcome to another video on this YouTube channel. I would consider myself to be a witch and healer, so there's going to be a lot of conversations on this platform around empowerment, magical mindsets, inspiration, divination, healing practices, and how we can weave and move through life with the trajectory of becoming more enlightened, more wise, more magically minded, and emitting that vibration, that intention with everything that we do, essentially. So that's one of the main reasons why I share on YouTube and other platforms, and it's going to be the foundation point about any video that I post. So this video in particular is going to be really geared towards the beginner in witchcraft or magic. So you may have found yourself to this video because you are beginning your magical or witchcraft practice, or are looking to improve your practice. You're looking for magical or witchy tips to implement in your everyday witch living. Or you are also somebody that likes to participate in community-based conversations around sovereignty, around empowerment, around development, and striving to be excellent in this life in whatever way that looks. I have used the skills and the knowledge and the tools that I developed both in my magical and mundane lives and woven them into all of my interactions, as many as I can. We're always going to be students and working on something, so I'm never going to sit here and profess that I have it all figured out and that I'm perfect. No way. But I do like to implement these little tips and tricks and tools that I have just accumulated over the last 20 plus years being a magic practitioner, being a healer, being a diviner, and just really choosing the path less traveled, but the one that experiences greater adventure, greater wisdom, more access to power and transformation, creating change on Gaia to manifest greatness. So that is going to be a little bit about what this channel is about. So specifically in today's conversation, I really just wanted to hold space for a mentality that I see showing up in practitioners and that I have also experienced as a witch and magic practitioner along my journey. So when we think about our magical journey, there are so many obstacles, there are so many roadblocks on this journey. There really is. It is definitely a path that's less traveled. It's one that's less spoken about, maybe less accepted in certain family or culture or, community-based cultures. It really demands and asks the practitioner to be firm in their foundations, in their beliefs, and in how they walk through life, to grow, to connect, to commune with the unseen realm, with the spirit realm, with their own inner psyche and understanding of what in the external outer world may have impacted them and prevented them from truly stepping into their authentic magical selves. So many obstacles as we start to weave our way in this magical and witchy space. There are a myriad of amazing subjects and sparkly trinkets and objects, and so we can very quickly get lost in consumerism and forget about the very important factor of development, meditation, journaling, and just going within the whole inner world, weaving and and breaking down old while we start to build new and fortify newer mindsets and magical practices. We can forget about that when we get lost in the external of exciting trinkets and shiny crystals and tarot decks and new books and all of these things. So this path is one that always is gonna challenge that baby practitioner, which to remember what their true north is, what their ultimate goal is. And it's okay to veer off and be like, ooh, shopping spree. And then it's okay to go over here and maybe step away for a little bit and reevaluate what good looks like for you, as long as we always remember to come back to the center of it, which is the magic within, the development within, that we are ultimately, that's the ultimate cauldron of transformation, to go from living a more mundane life to living a more magical life, in every step and breath and word that we speak. There can be other conversation in this space where, we kind of go into this if then mindset. If I have this tarot deck, then I'm going to be that diviner. If I have this book, then I'm going to automatically have a relationship with that deity that I just feel really drawn to. If I take this class, then I'm suddenly going to be somebody that feels ready. And I'm just going to be able to move through life without that imposter syndrome ever showing up again for me. If then, it's a theme that I see show up in clients and students along the years, and it's definitely a theme that I have found myself in multiple times over my journey in this life as a practitioner. So one of the main points of that I wanted to highlight today is the if then when it comes to classes. I've had people join class for various reasons. And one of the reasons is, I took this class and I didn't really implement some of what I learned. And so now it's been 6, 12, 24, 36 months later, and I need to take this class again because, I don't feel like I have that access to that magic anymore, that healing practice or modality. I don't really have that connection with the cards like I did in that class. So one of the reasons why we're going to choose classes, and I absolutely love and recommend, especially new or developing practitioners, to follow that breadcrumb of your intuition and sign up for classes and services. Now, remember, at the end of all of those things, take some time to kind of process through what you experienced and really, once again, connecting with that magic cauldron within, really kind of mull over what resonates with me based on what I learned here, in the magical space. And the more that we connect with our higher selves and our spirit team and our animal totems and our ancestors and all of these unseen energies that are within circles and spirals of layers around us all the time in the unseen realm, the more that we're going to start to really feel or really experience within different clairs when something is aligned and resonates for us. For example, I will sometimes get tingles on my body, and specifically my feet will actually vibrate when spirit is confirming like you're on the right path. So that could be a metaphor for like which step I'm on. So I'll get certain impulses, certain sensations in my body from spirit, from my higher self, when I'm taking steps and actions that are aligned for me. And specifically when I'm wondering, like, is this something that is aligned for me right now? It might show up around that. Even like when you first, the thought doesn't even complete, it's just a little, and you'll feel it. So That might not be something that happens in the beginning of your journey, but as you continue on, those sorts of sensations, and they may show up different ways based on the different psychic centers that you're more naturally attuned to, but they will develop and increase over time. So I always strive to communicate, like, let intuition and those intuitive hits lead you. We want a community of magic practitioners that use their own discernment and empowerment and decision-making skills to perpetuate their journey. So I always like to have the conversation to encourage classes and sessions, but sometimes as beginners, and maybe even not, but beginners and developing witches and practitioners, we can kind of get in this mindset that the class is going to be the finish line. It's a great step to show in the physical material world that we are dedicating ourselves to a certain area within our practice, and it requires us to have more accountability. You know, there's money involved, there's time involved. We're putting a plan into place, but all of those things are scheduled and planned by the facilitator, by the teacher. They're letting you know, like, this is how much it costs. This is where you need to be. This is when you need to log in or have that butt in that seat. This is how long it's going to take, and this is what you're going to learn. And so really, when we step into class space and we're being led and guided like that, we really have half the work done for us. And so we go and we participate, and it's amazing, and we're around others that have similar outlooks on life. They're on similar journeys, and they're also emitting and sharing this beautiful, loving energy and frequency in this class space. And so the pillar and the spiral and the vortex of energy that's created in class space is magnified just based on, even if it's just you and the teacher. But when there's more people that are also there for, you know, the right reasons. Obviously, we can have some people that mess up classes. We could talk about that whole situation in another video, but ultimately it's going to have this beautiful overflow of healing and magical and rejuvenation energy. And so we leave that class with that magical or healing high, and it stays with us for a couple weeks. Now, typically when we'll take a magical or spiritual or healing based class, there will be some time that's spoken about to allow some of what you experience to integrate and settle into your body, your mind, your heart, your soul, your different layers of your energy centers and all of these things. Depending on the class, they may have some follow-up. I do really like classes where they will have next steps to keep that accountability piece going. Like, hey, you spent a pretty penny for this healing certificate class. You learned a lot of things. Just so you know, once a month, we're going to have our group get together with everyone that's taken this class or at least has this certificate. So we know they have this baseline knowledge of what we're doing. We're going to get together once a month. We're going to get together once a quarter and just continue to nourish and develop and hold space and Q&A and all this stuff for what we learned. I really like that because it allows, the community and the communication and some of that accountability piece to continue on after that initial class. But a lot of classes may not. They may just be like, hey, here's the beginning. This is what you need to know. This is how you start to develop your tarot practice. This is how you use a crystal ball or a scrying mirror, and off you go, and so then we think, okay, cool. I learned all of these things. I took notes. I did a practice. Great, finish line. But one of the main areas where we get stuck is that accountability planning piece of it that we didn't have to participate in because it was led by the teacher or instructor. and then the class ends, and we kind of have this magical high for a couple weeks, and then it slowly fades, and we haven't started to develop our own practice to continue to exercise those magical muscles, so to speak, and continue to develop that. So that's one of the main things that I want to challenge you with today. Think about the last classes that you've taken in the magic, witchy, healing-based space. And were there certain aftercare steps that said, like, hey, it would be a great idea if you sat down and did some of these things? Or, hey, you might want to think about doing this on this frequency. When I think about my Reiki practice, there isn't too much of that, mostly because it's going to depend on the individual. I might give certain suggestions like, hey, be aware of these things. It's going to be aftercare. Hey, do you have a meditative practice? Hey, do you have any sort of reflective practice? Do you have any sort of practice that is going to keep you checking in with your inner soul? So there might be some of those conversations, but I'm not prescribing. I'm not really saying like, you really need to do this. So much of what we do in this space really is personal discovery, accountability, and planning for what next steps after that class look like. So I really would challenge you when it comes to your last class. Think about what you learned, what you experienced, what you felt. Were you super thrilled, or were you disappointed? Were your expectations met, exceeded, or not met? Why or why not? What would you like to see in that space, and what could you bring to help that space be even better for everyone involved? Because when we think about what we're also bringing, whether it's like, I'm going to be rested, I'm going to, have my social button on, I'm going to participate, I'm going to be open and aware with all of my senses, so that way I can really use this opportunity as a launch for discovering new gifts and tools and resources within my own magical muscles. What can I give to this? And also, give yourself like a good couple days after class, or maybe start right away, but just think about what your personal preferences are. And then after that class or workshop, then sit down and put a plan together. Be very realistic about what you have capacity for on a regular, weekly, or daily basis. What can you dedicate time for to continue your practice or development with, that will be a balance of what you have capacity for, or sacrifice what you need to sacrifice for, depending on the situation. If your life is so busy and your plate is so incredibly full that you don't have any space to even wake up early or stay a little late or carve out some extra time in the bathroom or something like that to continue to develop your magical or witchy practice after you've taken a class or read a book or any of these things that give you new information and tools to use, that's going to be a pretty big look in the mirror and a hard acknowledgement of what your time is spent doing. Are all of those things really serving and feeding you? Or do we need to look at maybe what needs to be outsourced, perhaps, or automated, perhaps, or removed, perhaps? That could be a conversation if there is absolutely no time. But for those who do have some time that they can dedicate, let's put a plan into place. Let's say, hey, every Sunday, I'm going to spend the first hour when I wake up. I've brewed my tea, I'm sipping my java, and I'm going to sit down and I'm going to go into this space and I'm going to just meditate on what I learned. I'm going to connect with my inner soul. I'm going to connect with my guides. I'm going to focus this hour once a week on continuing what this unlocked within me. Now, another reason why people kind of fall away after class is they might not talk about and they might not realize the difference between being in class space versus being solo. So when we're in a group of people, and my empaths will definitely know this, but even non-empaths will feel this on a certain level of their psyche. When we are in community space, we're going to have, just like I mentioned earlier, this cone, this circle, this sphere of accumulated energy that is mingling and interacting and building within the experience of the group setting. Whereas when we are solo, the energy is going to be smaller, especially in the beginning, because it's just energy from ourselves, just from within this aura, within this room. And so it's going to be a little bit quieter. If we want it to be louder, that's when we have to excite our energy, whether that is movement, whether that is chanting, whether that is like some rattles or some bells or something that is going to build on that energy in a solo space. But if we're just kind of in our poise, internal, reflective, it's going to be a little bit for that energy to build. And so sometimes people don't get as much out of a solo session. And so it's easier to be like to the back burner. But I really want to challenge you today to think about how we could spend a little bit more time in that solo, internal, soul developmental space, especially when it's like, I just read this book. It gave me these tips. You know, there was that moment where I captured that one thing that they were talking about and had this aha moment. Oh, I could implement that into my practice. And I haven't, you know, and so just taking that leap and putting that plan into place, setting an alarm on your phone, writing it down. There are so many tips and tricks that we can implement to help our goals be more of a reality, to understand the roadblocks that show up in our individual lives and set certain systems in place to be able to counter them and keep us on track as we start to develop new routines within our own magical and witchy practices. So let me know your thoughts. Let me know if this created any aha moments for you from classes or sessions or developmental groups or books that you've read in the past. You know, are there certain things that you're like, dang, Mina is on to something today, and I really need to do better about this particular thing. You know, share any of those thoughts down in the comment section below. I would love to hear what you have to say. So thank you so much for holding space for this conversation. I will see you next time. Until then, stay wild and spooky, but most of all, stay magical. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to this YouTube channel so that way you can stay up to date with conversations that are just like this one. So if you made it to the end, if you vibed with what we were talking about today, then consider subscribing. All right, I will see you next time. Bye.